for joining this table talk session today. As you come into the room, please mute your lines and enter your name, organization, and location in the chat. We'd love to see who is joining us today. This is the session with Habitat for Humanity. So to make sure everyone's in the right place. Give everybody a few seconds to get situated. Go ahead and mute your lines as you come in. We'll get started in just a couple seconds. Great, good to see you all. Thanks for posting your name, organization, and location in the chat. I am Kaya Peterson. I'm the room host for this session for the Habitat for Humanity Table Talk. Very excited to have you joining us today. Table Talks are a new addition to the conference this year and are meant to facilitate peer exchange around topics of current interest. So intended for this session to be conversational and interactive, and happy to have Heather Harp from Habitat for Humanity of Missoula joining us to share some perspective and pose some questions. A couple quick housekeeping items before I pass it over to Heather. Just note that our sessions are being recorded and all sessions will be available on the conference website after the conference for 6 months, so you have access to all the great content. And just remember to keep your lines muted, and once Heather gives the hey, let's talk, we can come off mute and post questions in the chat and go from there. All right, Heather, take it away.
Thanks everybody for joining me this morning. It's also really great to see some other Habitat affiliates. So I see Martin No Runner from our Great Falls affiliate, new to the job, what, 2 months, 3 months maybe? Oh, just one. Holy cow. All right. How time flies. So folks, my name is Heather Harp. I'm the executive director here in the Missoula Habitat. Been on the job for a little over 2 years, but I also come with some city council experience. And in that perch, I got to really hear about what the housing problem was like. And then when I moved into this position, I actually get to be an implementer of solutions. And one of the things that I heard oftentimes on council is this idea that housing has just gotten so expensive. So I just want to touch on this idea of the 5 L's, which are the 5 cost components to construction, so that we all are working within the same framework. And those 5 L's are labor, lumber, lending, lots, and laws. And if you're anything like Missoula, and I think most of the state falls into this category now, we see that all of these are up. But in particular, one of the greatest increases has been on the cost of land. And more importantly, how we convert land actually into lots that we can actually build upon. And as I've noticed here in Missoula, we've seen just tremendous amount of sprawl continue to happen, which we have to admit, as we see our rivers flooding to such great heights today, that climate change is still a very important concern that we have to be cognizant of. And as construction is one of the leading causes of climate change, it definitely falls upon us to do our very best to be better stewards of our land. And that, I think, can be done via infill development versus continuing to sprawl. So I'm going to share with you an idea that we've been hatching here at Habitat, and just kind of would love to get the pulse of the room about what you think about this concept as we try and move our laws, if you will, our zoning laws in particular, towards something that can actually make more effective use of our land and actually reduce the cost of construction altogether. So I'm going to share with you a graphic here that this kind of just represents a typical lot here in Missoula. Could be in Great Falls, could be in Choteau, could be Chinook, wherever. But we have a primary house on a piece of property. Usually we hopefully will find a tree or two on there as well. But maybe that backyard doesn't have anything back there, or maybe there's a shed, or maybe there's a detached garage. So one of the things I often heard on the council was that everybody who would come to council would complain about property taxes becoming a larger and larger component. You're absolutely right. There's no denying that. That's becoming an absolute truth. So we have property tax holders who are worried about their taxes. But if they wanted to build an accessory dwelling unit and wanted to be part of the solution, put in a rental unit in their backyard, it's going to require that person to have the financial capability to actually build that extra home in the backyard. And not everybody has the ability to do it, nor do they necessarily have the know-how to actually be the contractor or know what questions to ask of a contractor to actually make that ADU happen. And we've also seen just the huge increase in construction costs. So that has also prohibited a lot of ADUs being built. And I bring up ADUs because this is the concept most of us are familiar with now. And the laws around that idea has shifted over time to make them more palatable, if you will, and more likely to occur. But what we've also seen is that we really haven't seen a big uptick in terms of the construction of ADUs. But at the end of this too, we're trying to actually move the needle towards away from rentals, but also towards more home ownership opportunities that are still affordable. So here's the idea in particular, folks, that I'm looking for your help on. What if we put a dotted line of demarcation or a subdivision line back here that would allow the primary homeowner to be able to sell off the backyard or donate that backyard to a community land trust? And when that happens, at least in my neighborhood, I would see my tax bill drop by 25% because my property tax reflects half of it towards the improvements or the homes, and the other half is on the land. And so that equals 25%. And so it would allow me to reduce my property tax, building additional homes here, rather than in a sprawling neighborhood, would also reduce the infrastructure costs of that kind of construction. And this is probably one of the second largest components of cost of construction is the infrastructure itself. So that makes a big savings. Additionally, when people don't have to drive or commute to their home and work to the extent of 20, 30 minutes or an hour or more, it also gives them more time to spend with their loved ones. It gives us increased density, which we know is a better outcome from an environmental standpoint as well as an economic one. And most importantly, it adds that affordability component to home ownership and allows us to actually go back in time, if you will, to when housing prices are a bit lower. And why I say that is because the community land trust basically allows us to purchase the land one time, put it into the trust, and then we steward it forever. And our future homeowner in the backyard will pay property taxes, but not on the land, just on the home. So they will pay their fair share of property taxes like everybody else. But we get that lasting component for generations to come. So I wanted to open it up and see if anybody wanted to shoot this idea with any holes that they might have, because this is an opportunity we can do that, but prior to our legislative session that's going to be coming up next year. And this is an idea we're really trying to create that can move the needle in terms of affordability. So please go ahead, unmute yourselves, raise your hand. I'm going to stop sharing here for just a second and bring it up if we need to.
Yeah, and everyone feel free to come on video and be present in that way. Heather, maybe I'll kick us off. So my first question is, in that photo you're showing, it looks like there's just a portion of the land that's going into the land trust, not the full parcel. So does that require that there's an additional parcel created, or what's the underlying kind of land definition that facilitates that? Yeah,
so my land acquisition development team comprised of a lot of professionals in land use planning and law. You know, we're still trying to define that. Maybe it would be a townhome exemption, Or it could be a minor subdivision, and we're still really trying to figure out which path we go down. But the idea is to try and simplify the process itself for permanent affordability that comes with the community land trust model, so that it's as easy as possible and and can incentivize people who want to be problem solvers for housing to have an easy lift. And so we're still trying to figure out which pathway we go there.
Okay, great. And there is a question here from Karen Cleveland. What kind of limitations as far as locations? Would there need to be a geographic proximity to be included in the community land trust?
No, there should not be any geographic barriers, I would think. So there's discussion about whether or not we should try and do this one parcel at a time, or if we're going to be able to just create a overlay for permanent affordability that could overlay the entire city. That's ideally what we can do. That we know that there is one particular zoning district called RT 2.7 that allows for permanent affordability to get the density that we need. So something along this very tool, but for whatever reason, it hasn't been cut and pasted into all the other zoning districts. And I think that's something that there is an ability for even local jurisdictions to be able to make that correction. But it's going to take a council that's going to approve that sort of thing, but you got to come with the pros and the cons of the concept first.
Great, and you started to touch on this. Mary Jo asked about what about zoning restrictions? You talked a little bit about Missoula. What would you say about zoning restrictions?
Well, there's the reality is every one of our cities is zoned to be restrictive intentionally. We have exclusionary zoning on all of our books. And what I mean by that is that I would estimate that 75 to 80% of each of our communities is zoned single family housing only. And that's the most restrictive kind of zoning there is. And it's something that our predecessors generations ago put in place, thinking that was a good model. Here we are living the repercussions of that generations later. And it's up to us so that we can actually move from exclusionary zoning to something that would be more inclusive. And even though we know our state legislature has actually disallowed inclusionary zoning as what we have normally talked about in this kind of housing space, we can create workarounds. And I think this is one of those workarounds that would allow any property owner the private property right to subdivide their property for home ownership, in particular for permanent affordability.
Yeah, whole host of issues and questions around how zoning can impact this, but some good action in various communities. Do you know of anything that's going on in Billings around this, or maybe there's other folks on the call from Billings who may be able to speak to land trusts, accessory dwelling units, zoning structure?
You know, I don't know what Billings is working on, but I would, if anybody is here from Billings, I would love to hear from you.
Where are you going?
Michelle, that's you? Michelle, are you from Billings?
Oh, I'm sorry, you guys. No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Michelle, your mic all of a sudden started working.
Well,
that's great.
Because I went through Zoom instead of Wova or whatever that's called. Yeah,
Oh,
it made a difference.
Perfect.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, that's all right.
Wow.
No, I suspect Billings, who has been a little bit more reticent about following up on community land trusts, I think they're starting to feel the pain themselves with their housing costs. And it wouldn't surprise me if we start seeing more CLTs happening in on that end of the state for sure.
Hey, Ermina, are you willing to chime in, come off of mute and share what you know there? Great. Thanks.
Sure. Hi, Ermina Harold, Director of Trust Montana Statewide Community Land Trust. We have presented a few times to the Billings Association of Realtors, as well as the economic development folks in the Billings area who are actually pretty motivated recently to look into the CLT model. I'm not sure where they stand on that. They were kind of trying to decide whether to try to start their own CLT organization or work with Trust Montana. Last we talked to them, and I don't know anything about whether the Habitat affiliate there would like to do community land trusts either. But Heather, do you know the director there?
Yeah, Jim Woollyhand. And from what I remember, he's more interested in other shared equity options where they could recapture some of the subsidy at a future sale, but not at this point in the CLT.
Okay, cool.
But I think more of us affiliates with Habitat are moving in that direction, and maybe in a year or two, Jim will come around. Who knows?
Yeah.
Martin, I see you up there. Over in Great Falls, are you working with CLTs yet?
No, not yet, but I think that what you just said there is kind of moving as a united front with the affiliates is something that's going to bode well for everybody. And that is kind of the sentiment that I had gotten when I went down to the retreat down in Colorado with the affiliates in Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico. I mean, basically they're a template for what's going to happen here and what already is happening here. And so they utilize that CLT model template already, and just breaking it into kind of something where it's going to mold to what we need it to mold to in places like Missoula, especially where you have the restriction of the environment there, the mountains, where you really don't have the availability to move out. You don't have that sprawl. And so it's by necessity where it has to start there, but that same type of thing is going to bode well for everybody else in the state that needs to implement that, ASAP.
Yeah, it looks like a couple other folks from Billings chiming in. Morgan, Housing Navigator in Billings, and James on the Mid Yellowstone Valley Habitat Board. See if you can push Jim. Great.
Yeah.
A couple great advocates and voices there in Billings.
Yeah. James Clanky, could you talk about what your Habitat affiliate is doing now, just so that I'm on the same page? James Clanky, can you come off of mute? No audio.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Do we have any other Habitat affiliates on the call today, Heather? Wasn't sure.
I know we got not necessarily executive directors, but I saw several names come up from Sam and Cassie from the Helena affiliate.
Hey, Cassie.
Hey.
Hi there.
I'd love to share our project that we're doing on Shodo. Hi. Can you hear me
Please
okay?
do. Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. So Shodo, we had a home, 2-bedroom, 1-bath home that was donated to us last year. And currently we are in the process. We have taken the initial garage in the backyard, taken it down to the foundation, and we have built a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 1.5-bath ADU in the backyard, and have rehabilitated, converted the 2-bedroom into a 4-bedroom, 2-bath. And that will be on a community land trust as well. We're actually looking at really educating a lot of realtors in Helena about the community land trust through this process on Shodo. So really excited to get the word out there in Helena too about these. We have a couple resales for homes that we built 3 or 4 years ago that are not on a land trust, and we're hoping that maybe we can facilitate those into converting them into a land trust as well.
Can I add a detail just because I think it'll be interesting to people, Cassie?
Of course.
So my understanding, once before Trust Montana takes the parcels underneath those homes on Shoto, my understanding is that they were able to do a boundary line relocation so that both of the homes will be on separate parcels. So there, it won't be an ADU in the sense that it can't be separately owned. They'll be under two conveyable separate parcels, and that's not necessarily possible with every situation. But I think there were 3 parcels, Cassie, or 3 lots, and they're just redrawing those to 2. But you can correct me.
Mhm. Sounds like you know more on that part of.
We were looking at having to do a TED at first, and so that was why it was really exciting to find out that you can avoid that if it's just some parcels that need to be kind of redrawn. So
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, Ermina, I think that brings up a good point. In the scenario that I illustrated, there might be situations where we would have to do a boundary line readjustment there too. But the idea is, how can we create those infill lots where oftentimes the backyard is underutilized. And when we think about the best and highest use of property today, I think the more and more we can create denser neighborhoods, it makes them more walkable, which makes things a heck of a lot easier in terms of our climate change goals in particular. All right, James is asking, does this address easement issues off of alleyway? One of the things to make this work, James, is that there are basically 4 interim zoning rules that we would like to really affect to make this happen. And one of them is that we have to reduce minimum lot sizes. Secondly, we got to reduce parking requirements. Third, we got to reduce setbacks, and alleyway is one of those. And there's a certain amount that we need for safety reasons, so that people can, as well as making turning radiuses into garages that are on the alleyway. But I think a lot of neighborhoods still have these ridiculously wide easements. And so if we can minimize those for the purposes that they need to serve, I think we can also achieve that. And the 4th thing that we would like to do is reduce the activity areas for especially higher density projects. And why that matters is that what we've also heard from our constituents and from other partners is that there are more and more people who are looking to actually reduce their landscaping needs. We have a growing contingent of people who identify as single person households comparatively to nuclear families of decades ago when I was a youngster. And so more and more people don't want the headache of having to find a mower or do the mowing themselves. And so if we can take advantage of that need by doing that within our own backyards, I think it creates a win. Additionally, we have a lot of, here in Montana, we have a lot of people who are up in that upper age category who, in all honesty, have lived in their home for a long period of time. It's 4 or 5 bedrooms, and maybe they're down to 1 or 2 people, and have no place to downsize to. So they're still living in that 4 or 5 bedroom home that may be paid off or maybe not. But we want to create housing for them as well and free up those 4 or 5 bedrooms for the larger families that could use that. And so we could create this opportunity as a switch, if you will, of where we can move that primary resident into the backyard, smaller home, and put a Habitat family in the front home.
So one of the things I know we've seen with similar projects in other places is challenges with valuations and appraisals and cost of building. Can you speak to those issues a little bit with this particular model, Heather?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times people make this assumption that when you have low income housing next to you, or even in your backyard, that will degrade the value of your own land, of your own property. And I believe it's the state of Utah actually did a study on this very concept. And it came back like actually affordable housing projects do not actually or devalue your own property. So I think that's a myth that has floated out there for a long period of time. And it's one that I think we can talk our way out of pretty easily. I think that with the homes that we build in particular, they are high quality. They aren't top end finishes, but they are good quality homes, and they're well designed. And I think that design also impacts the value of the home as well as the surrounding ones. So I think if we keep good design forefront, then I think we can also have really good outcomes in terms of helping all the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about these assumptions and fears versus reality. And then there is the challenge of if you're building an accessory dwelling unit, whether your property value increases enough to account for the construction costs, and if you can access enough financing to support that additional build. Is that an issue that you've seen or are contemplating?
I don't think so. You know, I don't know. I think one of the things we've noticed with ADU construction here in Missoula, prior to our changes a couple of years ago on the council, we had 4 ADUs built each year, and we eased some of those restrictions, and now we're up to 7 per year, which is in the right direction, but is definitely not bringing online the numbers that I think we on council had hoped for, which tells me that it's not just the deregulation, it's also the cost of construction and the know-how on how to actually build that has really stymied additional ADU construction. So Habitat, we are not in the business of building ADUs for someone else to rent out. That's the reality. We are in the business of building futures through home ownership. So this is why I believe that Habitat is well poised to be an infill developer if we have the right kind of regulatory environment, because we are really good builders. We know how to do this, and we can bring our brand and its financing abilities to a project that otherwise may not happen.
Yeah, it's a great role that you're playing and looking to play.
It's just one of many tools that have to be put in the toolbox. And, we have to talk about the 3 S's when it comes down to how we can get ourselves out of this housing crisis. One is increase supply through deregulation, simplify the process for builders. Number 2, we got to build actually real subsidy for our projects, because no matter how much we supply the market with today, it's going to still take 10 years or more for it to actually filter to affordable. So we got to have that subsidy from the state level. And lastly, we also have to focus on stability. Half of our population still rents, and they are being pushed out. And so we have to figure out some ways for renter stability as well, so that they can get themselves on a good solid footing, so that they can actually see themselves as future homeowners. And today, when you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing costs, there is no room to save for a down payment.
All right, well, we're at the end of our time together today. Heather, thanks for bringing such a great model and conversation. Lots of really good food for thought and hopefully inspiring to other communities. Also appreciate hearing from some of the rest of you across the state what you're up to. Yeah. Habitat is getting even more creative and innovative, and exciting to see that work growing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
So just a reminder for everybody, you can participate in continuing this conversation, chatting with your peers, finding like-minded colleagues in your part of the state by using the conference website and all the great functionality there on the Whova app. So we're now off to a lunch break, a 1-hour break, and then we'll have another round of 1-hour breakout sessions at 1 p.m. Just a reminder that the Housing Development on Montana's Indian Reservation session had to be canceled due to some challenges for one of the presenters' families. So we do have 4 great breakouts still available to you at 1 o'clock. We'll see you there. And after those breakups, we'll conclude with a keynote address at 2:30 today. So thanks again, Heather. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your lunch break.
Ciao.